Stand right up here.
It's possible with new people, new candidates, new ideas, and I think that novelty, that refresher, that new beginning, that fresh start is what will attract back those traditional free enterprise protest voters.
Okay, we're going to go to Robert, then we're going to David, then we're going to Dolores. Robert.
Thank you. Brian, thank you for hosting. Very generous and again, wonderful of you. Just thank you for being home. Jason, thank you for your leadership, certainly in the last number of years in the Conservative Party and in Canada. We're just very proud to be a Canadian and proud to watch how you stood up for certainly Ukrainians as a person of Ukrainian descent. Very, very important. And I feel a lot of courage, so thank you for that. My question is, as someone is, next week as we go to the Red Deer, and it's the Progressive Conservative Association of Alberta's Policy Convention, what types of, what would you like to see as far as when the delegates arrive? How would you like to see them? What would you like to see the outcome? And how we as certain people, we as delegates to that policy convention next week, what can we do to help ensure that we have this union? I'm going to make one statement here. I believe that the vast majority of Albertans truly want simply one place. Please bring the two parties together. And how do we get rid of it?
First, thanks, Robert, for those comments and your support. When you say I was courageous on Ukraine, that makes me nervous. Maybe Vladimir Putin's going to be cracking into my emails. Who knows? I literally have somebody on my staff the other day say, you better watch out, the Russians might be trying to get into your emails now. That's part of what's going on in the States. Seriously, on your question, thank you for going to the Red Deer. Just so for those of you who don't follow this too closely, right now the Wild Rose Party is having its AGM at Red Deer. I wish them well, and I just put out a video encouragement to them, trying to keep this as positive as I can on both sides. PC Policy Conventions next week. I just hope we have tried to put on the agenda some constitutional amendments to reverse some of the undemocratic rules they have adopted for the Leadership Convention that set aside half of the voting positions for effectively for unelected people. We think that we should maximize and not minimize grassroots democratic input in the election of the leader. But so far, we're not sure, but so far we believe they have canceled our resolutions and will not be presenting them to the floor. So depending on how many pro-unity people show up, or just pro-democracy people show up, if you will, we're hoping that if we can get 2/3, we can force a vote on a couple of those resolutions to maximize the democratic part of the PC leadership election. But even if we don't get there, I'm still a happy camper, because we're going to have a lot of people showing with a smiling face, enthusiasm and optimism, support for the idea of unity. So making the argument in the hallways and the corridors and at the microphones will demonstrate to some who are resistant to the idea that there's a lot of support for it. And I think that's the most important thing.
All right, we're going to go with David and then Dolores.
Jason, first, I mean, you really ought to be commended for putting yourself forward and fighting this fight, which certainly on behalf of Alberta needs to be fought. I think it's true when you said that the party left me. I didn't leave the party. I think there's a lot of people who feel that way. And that comes to the point that I'm asking about, I guess. When we hear about these transfer payments, and the fact that Ottawa has been taking money, billions and billions of dollars, more from Alberta, and certainly Alberta's been getting back. We have all these problems with pipelines. We have very little support in the rest of the country. You're coming from Ottawa. You've been down there fighting on behalf of Alberta for the last 15, 20 years. You're now back in Alberta fighting on behalf of Albertans. I'm curious to know how you're going to make the case to your federal friends and colleagues about the way not only Alberta has been treated. In the past doesn't matter, but today, when we're suffering the devastation that we're suffering because of the NDP, because of the federal Liberals, if you do manage to put all this stuff together, which God bless you if you can, and then get down there, how are you going to make them change the way Alberta is being treated?
Thank you, Dave. First of all, strange beyond belief that we are in one of the worst recessions in our history, and yet continue to be the major contributors to equalization, redistributing wealth to provinces that are in a period of economic growth. I won't mention any of them, Quebec. And that's on top of, I believe the latest figure is $198 billion in cumulative transfers through fiscal federalism out of Alberta since 1965, which amounts to, well, tens of thousands of dollars per family. And we are generous people. We don't mind sharing much of the resources that we've been inherited through Providence in this province. But surely, when we are in our own tough times, we shouldn't be paying into the system. So all I can tell you is I would join Common Cause with Brad Wall and British Columbia in demanding a total renewal of the equalization formula. Equalization itself has been enshrined in the Constitution as an obligation since the adoption of the Charter in the Constitution Act of 1982. So there's always going to be an equalization system, but it has to be fair. And I think one way of doing so is to account for renewable resources that, like Quebec and Ontario, generate billions out of their hydro projects, which are not discounted from their equalization formula in the same way that our energy production is. So that would be one, and I love what Brad Ball says, you know, maybe one way to get our pipelines built is if we send our equalization checks through the pipelines eastward. It's a bit cheeky, but the point is, somebody has to make that case politically down east, and I would certainly do so.
Someone just whispered in my ears we have time for 4 more questions, so I have on my list Dolores, Gordon, Schrape, Lee, and Rada. Now, I just want to acknowledge, we're going to call on Dolores. I want everybody to know Dolores Pilson is the Executive Director of the Calgary Youth Forum. She puts in endless hours as a volunteer to do all this.
Thank you. Brian knows that I have absolutely no opinion on anything. But I did tell Jason that I was kind of the socialist in the group. In my opinion, one of the things that happens to people because they don't get all the information, we don't communicate properly, and it's real easy to splash somebody. People think that the PCs, the Wild Rose, are so far right, they're intolerant. So any movement that you have right now has to be to make sure that people understand there's inclusion for anybody, that we're not intolerant, that we embrace everybody. Social justice is one of those buzzwords, and that's something that people kind of hang on to, even though there really isn't anything concrete that they can look at. There are so many things. I mean, I know that we need subsidized housing. I know that we need subsidized health care, and somebody who makes some money, I don't mind paying for that, and I'm quite fine with that sort of thing. But people need to understand what happens to this province without a pipeline. I'm tired of saying goodbye to my friends. Right. Every week I go to a new farewell party. And one of the buzzwords that we also hear is diversification. What the hell is diversification? How is that going to put 50,000 people back to work? And I think that's real important for people to know. The oil industry has done a great job of, bringing things down, but they haven't let people know what that looks like now as opposed to what it did 50 years ago. The pipeline spills are generally from pipelines that are 40, 50, 60 years old. Anything new, we haven't done a good job of letting people know what we actually do. How do we do that? How do we let people know that, yeah, we can do this in a safe manner, and we're not going to jeopardize 100 years down the road?
Thank you. First of all, if you're a socialist, you're my kind of socialist. That was a lot of common sense there. On your question, a couple of people heard me give a speech to an energy forum at the Petroleum Club a few months ago, where I really gave heck to our energy company leadership for having abandoned the fight in public opinion years ago. I think we have ended up with massive public ignorance about energy issues in Canada, including here in Alberta.
Absolutely.
I think some of it starts in the school system. I meet parents every week who tell me they can't believe their children come home and say to their father who works in the oil patch, "Daddy, why are you destroying the planet?" We have an amazing story to tell, which happens to be true, that we are clearly the most environmentally responsible major producer of oil and gas in the world, bar none, with the highest human rights and labor standards, which is one of the reasons, that's right. Which is one of the reasons we have the most expensive costs for exploration and development, which puts us at a huge disadvantage. And we have to at least tell our own kids this story first. You know, so I think that, I don't think the government of Alberta, and this applies especially to the current government, but to some extent to previous governments, I don't think we have, I think we became complacent and we took for granted that people understood that this industry is governed according to robust environmental rules and it is the source of much of our prosperity. We took it for granted and it doesn't. We allowed a vacuum to develop in the public discourse on these issues that was filled by largely foreign-funded interest groups. The Rockefeller Brothers Foundation in New York City, the Tides Foundation, Tom Steyer, a billionaire, made his money out of oil and gas. These organizations and individuals have funded a huge propaganda campaign in Canada to create, to suggest that our oil and gas industry is the moral equivalent of big tobacco. And we've never pushed back. So I think we need a big, serious, intelligent, coordinated approach that led by the government of Alberta and Saskatchewan, who are certainly doing their part now, and the energy industry. I would sit down with every major oil and gas executive in this province and say, you have extracted tens of billions of dollars cumulatively from this province and not invested a fraction of that into public education. We expect you to do that now. You know? I see some people are fighting back on this. There's like the fellow in town, Cody Batterstill, who has Oil Sands Action. There's other little energy citizens. There's some good little social media efforts, but a lot more needs to be done here.
I omitted acknowledging Dennis Little was a member of our board, so please wave, Dennis, so glad you're here. I want to, we have a former member of council and MLA for 30 years, Gordon Schwake. I have never known Gordon to ask a question under 5 minutes.
Oh, sorry, Gordon, I didn't see you back there.
Well, the first thing is, Jason, please remember you're a politician, not a scientist. Second thing, my advice to you is, don't join this new world religion. This religion, 2,000 years ago we had Christianity spread, and a few hundred years later we had the Muslim religion spread, and we have this strange one now, and for a while they called it global warming. But they quit calling it global warming. Why? Because it's not warming. 200 years ago up to now, it has warmed less, it's not half a degree. It was warmer in the Middle Ages than it is now. And we are not causing it. This is, but now they switch, it's climate change. And woe be to you if you speak against climate change. First off, there is climate change. And humans are not causing it. It's been climate change for 100,000 years. Used to right here where we're at, the ice was a mile thick. It's been melting. Of course the glaciers have been melting. They've been melting for 50,000 years. So, but beware, you can't. If you speak against climate change, they call it a climate change denier, and that is like, you know, they want to burn you at the stake. So please don't shut down the coal industry in this province and spend billions of dollars switching all of those electrical generating plants over, which it doesn't do away carbon dioxide. The gas burns a little bit less than coal. And anyway, oh, and the last thing, as far as us and carbon dioxide, we produce in this province maybe 1/5% of the world's carbon dioxide. China produces 32%. Between them and our American cousins,